Hi, my name is Candace Briley, and for this week's Module 4, I read the journal article entitled More Than Baby Talk, 10 Ways to Promote the Language and Communication Skills of Infants and Toddlers. And I thought the article was extremely helpful. Basically, the main purpose of the article was to provide 10 key practices for educators to utilize as a guideline for enhancing the language and communication development of infants and toddlers in early childhood education. And I thought the authors did a wonderful job of explaining why those practices are a necessary part of language development. And while I believe that a lot of the practices, as I was reading, were not unfamiliar and they seem to be pretty easy, I think that a lot of times many educators forget to give these practices the credit and the usage that they deserve. And so one thing that really stood out to me was how the key practices are completely adaptable. So whether you're working with ELL students or culturally diverse students, or even students with learning and or physical disabilities, you can simply adapt each key practice to fit the individual needs of your students. And one of my biggest takeaways from the article was that students really need multiple opportunities to strengthen their language and communication development. And basically, they need a wide variety. And so, and one interesting quote that I jotted down was, it said, a study found that 1/3 of language interactions between teachers and children were the type that support children's language development, while the other 2/3 included less complex language, such as directions, general praise, and rhetorical questions. And that was intriguing to me, and it validated why these guidelines that this article covered are so important to know, so that teachers can continue to promote language and communication skills early in childhood. Because when adults use higher quality language in their interactions with children, it provides them with language experiences that foster their growth in language and development. And as far as some questions, so just real briefly, the 10 practices were get chatty, which was number 1, which basically means, have engaging conversations with children. Number 2 was be a commentator, which was give descriptions of objects, activities, or events. 3 was mix it up, use different types of words and grammar. 4 was label it, providing children with the names of objects or actions. 5 was tune in, engaging in activities or objects that interest children. 6 was read interactively, using books to engage children's participation. 7 was read it again and again and again, read it multiple times. 8 was props please, which was introducing objects that spark conversations. 9 was make music, engage in musical activities. And then 10 was sign it, use gestures or simple signs with words. And so my question is, with these key practices in mind, which of these do you currently use? If any of you guys do, if you use any of these key practices, if you could give some examples. And I was just going to mention what mine was. As far as something I feel like I need to improve on, I feel like I use all of these. But number 3, just using different types of words and grammar. I've noticed that sometimes as an educator and even a mom, I can catch myself when talking to the little children, changing my tone or even using the baby talk and not engaging them in that wider variety of vocabulary and language. And that's something I'd like to work on. But have you guys used any of these key practices?
No, I haven't.
I haven't either, but that's probably because I'm not a teacher. But I do, yeah, like Candace said, I do kind of talk to younger students whenever I get a chance in a very baby talk, kind of childish way. And I feel like Candace, I need to work on, engaging them in higher vocabulary, because that's the only way that they're going to develop their vocabulary.
For sure.
I definitely catch myself doing that with my own kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a 6-year-old, so I definitely do that with him sometimes. I've got to remember not to do that with him, to speak to him as if he were a young adult.
Absolutely.
And
Well, I thought they were very easy to understand and definitely a great guideline to use.
Yeah, I like that article. I'm thinking about using it with the teachers that I work with. I'm a consultant. So a lot of those things that are listed in there are things that I tell the teachers in the infant and toddler classrooms to do, and I model for them. They really see a big difference when they start incorporating some simple signs into how they're talking with the kids, so that it's easier for the kids to communicate back with them.
definitely. So let's see here. Next one would be Trishna.
All right, so my name is Trishna, and the article I read this week is called Fostering Early Language with Infants and Toddlers by Alice Sterling Honig. And the basic idea of this article was kind of talking about how parents or teachers are they're very important in fostering a child's development and their literacy development and their language development. And there were several pieces of information in the article that interested me. There was one piece that said that children already start developing their language before they can actually speak. They start by babbling and cooing, and then they move on to one word phrases, and then they move on to like 2 to 3 word phrases. And something that really spoke to me about that is that we live in a very vocal society, and the fact that children try to speak and develop their language before they actually have the capability of saying words really shows that this society is reflecting on them. And the article also stated that children will start off by using terms such like ma and ba and just saying like different sounds, and they might not necessarily mean one thing or another, but like the parents, for example, if a child says like ma, the parent or the teacher might think that they're trying to say a certain word, even if they're not necessarily saying that word. It was really important for me to read this article because I feel like the early childhood are a child's most formative years. And because parents and teachers are so important, it's so important for them to help a child develop their language. The article talked about different ways that the parent could develop this language, in terms of self-talk or parallel talking. Even when a child is young, if you're doing an activity with them, or for example, like let's say you're helping them you're helping them clean up. It's like, oh look, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. I'm putting this plate here. Now we're helping setting the table. And just it said that it's very important to just talk to the child, and this is the best way to develop their language and literacy skills. There were a few quotes that I found interesting. One of my favorite ones, though, was it said, once we have provided the essentials of a safe environment with good health and nutrition practices for infants and toddlers in our care, the most fundamental gifts we can provide are a secure feeling of attachment to the primary caregivers, the development of rich language skills, and an abiding passion for learning. I found this quote important because I feel that a lot of times the academics always take the forefront when trying to teach a child something, but when a child is at this early childhood age, it's very important that the social and emotional development domains are also taken into consideration. And I feel that when a child feels safe in their environment and nurtured by their teacher or their parent or whoever's teaching them new skills, they're going to respond to the lessons better. And another quote that I found interesting was, it said, encourage semantic understandings. Toddlers say words sometimes without understanding their meanings, so check on meanings. When I was younger, my parents would always tell me that it's not enough to parrot something off when you're learning it. You have to make sure that the child understands what's going on and understands the process behind what they're learning. So it's not enough that they read a word and they memorize it and they repeat it back to you. They have to understand what they're talking about, and they have to understand what they're saying. That's the only way that they're going to develop their literacy skills. Now, in terms of questions, I have 2. So the first one is, most of you have young children, or you've had young children, you have grandchildren, maybe things like that. So first of all, what type of activities have you done or did you do with your child to foster their oral and literacy language skills? Do they have any fun songs they like to play, sing, or do they have any fun stories they like to read that will help them improve in their literacy skills?
Well, I think one of the examples that you gave is definitely something I've done at home when my children were really little, like, just explaining things to them, like, now I'm going to place this plate on the countertop, or I'm doing the dishes, where they can associate certain words with their meanings. And I think that that really helps them, especially when you're talking about real world scenarios for them. It gives them those meaningful learning experiences where they're able to connect words and develop their literacy language, for sure. And then in the classroom,
and I like,
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I like what you say about real world experiences, because like I have a 2-year-old cousin whose mom always talks to her and asks her things like, oh, you know, what is your dad doing today? Oh, my dad's at work. What's your brother's name? What are you doing? How are you feeling? And just kind of just like you said, just kind of talking to them and engaging them really helps develop these skills.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say too, even in the preschool age, in the classroom, you know, before kids can actually read, you know, when they're being read to, one activity you can do is after the reading of a story, open a discussion with the children where you're maybe even flip back through the pages of the books and you're pointing to a picture or pointing to a word and having a discussion about that so they can also make that association with the words and the pictures.
Right.
That's a good idea.
That's true.
And one other question I had is, in terms of your professional capacity and your personal capacity and your knowledge of young children, what kind of do you think are the best opportunities to foster a child's language? Like personally, after reading the article, I feel like one of the best times to do this is meal times. Meal times are a time when like the entire family comes together. You're not distracted by something else going on in the house. It's the only time that you can properly sit down and talk to your children and engage them, you know, like how was your day? What did you do today? This and that. Are there any other ideas of times that you think are the best opportunity to help a child practice their skills?
I usually do it when my kids get off the school bus.
Okay.
They get off the bus and first thing I do, how was your day? What did you do today? What did you learn? How did you do whatever activity you were doing? My daughter's doing choir, so you know she's learning new songs for the Halloween festival. Well, how did Miss Shingles go about showing you the words? Do you have to read it off the paper, or is she telling you and you have to recite it? And that's important for me because my daughter's dyslexic. So if she hands her a piece of paper to read words off of, it's not going to help her. So she has to verbally hear the words in order to be able to repeat them. So it just makes sense, like to ask her, are you having to read while you're in choir today, or what did you do while you were at school today? That's just me. I ask them as soon as they get off the bus because it's still fresh in their mind, like they just left school, so it's easier for them to catch it. Yeah
Being in the car is a good time for communication too, just talking back and forth when you're driving, especially when you're stuck in traffic and you have nothing else to do. They're buckled in, they can't get away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work with teenagers, though. They just tune you out. They put their
they're a completely different breed of human. I don't know what teenagers are.
I think that every opportunity that we have to talk to the kids is going to be a good opportunity so we can talk about what's going on. If we in the bus and we in the car, or maybe we're traveling. And it's a good opportunity, to keep talking to them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, not only meal times or bath time or, bedtime, all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Let's see the next one. That would be me. I'm Lisa, and I read Do infant vocabulary skills predict school language and literacy outcomes? This article was pretty interesting because it was based on infants from 16 to 24 months, and they were taking what they were learning, and if they didn't learn at a certain rate, their whole research was based on would this predict if they would have literacy issues in the future. It was based on a group of 300 kids in the UK. Let's see, some of them, 159 of those children were male. And the assessment lasted through age 8 and age 9. And for the infants, it was kind of hard to determine if they were actually getting the words and saying it back as they were being told. And then as far as the school age kids, they also took the outcome of, well, does family history of learning disabilities or learning issues play into the part of, do they have, will this be a predictor of their literacy issues in the future? Some of them were predictable, like if those who had family issues with literacy, they had that same issue as they were getting older. But I find it kind of a variable, because if the parents had issues or still continue to have literacy issues, how are they going to help their children with their work and help them in this study? Because they were given, like, they had to read to them, they had to do stuff with them. But again, if the parents had issues, is it accurate? Are the results accurate? It said the pathways from infant vocabulary to school age outcomes quantify the strength of these longitudinal relationships in terms of standardized beta weights. Just how did the actual data they collect, my issue was it accurate? They said that some of the family risk was not significantly related to school age vocabulary or phonological awareness, but those children actually ended up having issues understanding and comprehending the work that was given to them. Me personally, like I said, nobody in my family has ever had a learning disability. Nobody in my husband's side of the family has ever been diagnosed with learning disability. We've read to our children, we've worked with them, and my daughter has dyslexia. So there wasn't an issue on either side of the family. So if she had been part of the study, how would she have been weighed against the research? It was very odd that they were saying that the infants with delayed vocabulary development and a family risk of language literacy difficulties therefore appeared to be a heightened risk for developing reading conditions. But it also states that if there is not a pre-diagnosis of family, if there's a family at risk, those results aren't accurate. So I just wasn't sure what to really take away from the article, whether it was, they were saying that their conclusions weren't consistent. So they couldn't give a really good outcome of whether it was or was not whether or not the plausible viewing of vocabulary and early casual influence on later reading accuracy lended itself to or not to being able to have reading comprehension. And that's what my questions were. How can researchers accurately determine if a child with vocabulary issues will develop a learning disability? What do y'all think? If there's no predetermined parental issues or family issues with it, do you think the results would be accurate?
I don't know.
I know that's what
they don't. I'm not sure that they're really connected, though. I think it could be a factor, but it could, I'm not sure that it's the only cause.
That's what I said. Would it stand to reason that children who are exposed to high-level vocabulary during infancy and early childhood still develop literacy issues and learning disabilities? Like I said, my daughter, we exposed her to reading and speaking to them, as adults, and not so much baby talk. I mean, I do still do that sometimes with my littlest one, but for the most part, we spoke to them with a high level, vocabulary, but yet she still has learning disability.
And on the flip side of that, Lisa, is that you might have someone, that has a low vocabulary, that doesn't have a learning disability, but they may not even have as many exposures to a wider vocabulary. So
Right.
it's easy to see how they could accurately determine that. That's interesting. I'd have to personally do a little more research on that.
Exactly.
It's definitely an interesting topic for sure.
Okay, let's see who's next. We've got Celia.
Okay, well, see that everybody, you got a lot of experience as a teachers, as educators. So be patient with me. I do not have a lot of experience. Okay, my experience is in management, so it's a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
The article is getting ready to read, and something interesting about this article is about the language provides the foundation for the development of literacy skills, learning to communicate through gestures, sounds, and words, increases a child interested in later understanding of books and reading. And some of the main points of the article is about the parents are the most important person in the child's life. And parents help the children learn from the day they're born. And when parents love their children, make them feel safe and play with them, they feel special and nurtured. When parents care for the kids, that way, they will develop a sense of self-confidence. And that's something that I notices in my workplace, working for low-income families. And I can see the difference of when the parents really interact a lot with the kids, and when the kids, they're not so social. And then when we start investigating what's going on in the child family, we find out they're being raised by grandparents. And it's sad to see the difference about the child's vocabulary when both parents, in the family, and when it's about the grandparents. So it's really something that's real sad in the agency where I work. And my favorite quote about this article is learning how to pretend. This is a very important skill. It builds the imagination and thinking skills. They can put words together to share their thoughts and feelings, or learning how ideas are connected. And something let me find my notes. Something that I like about one of the teachers on my workplace, she knows how to read books in sign language.
Oh, wow.
And now one of the kids, when the teacher starts doing, like, say the title of the book, and she say it in sign language, the rest of the kids, not only the child that has a special needs, understand what kind of book they're gonna read. The other kids, they run and go for the book only when the sign language. And this is it's gonna be the third week of classes. And the kids already know what kind of books she's gonna be reading, because she introduced the letters and a lot of things in sign language since day one. Because it's a special ed teacher, and then she worked when this particular child that has hearing problems. So it's something I really relate this article when this teacher in that particular classroom. And I have only 2 questions. What can be done to ensure equality and the quality of education in both the high resource and low resource communities?
Ladies, real quick, just to let you know, we're coming down to 10 minutes remaining on the session. So.
And what is the best literacy curriculum for young children? And that's it.
I think for the first one, the important thing is to provide very similar opportunities for high resource and low resource communities, especially when it comes to literacy development. Just having, educators who really know what they're doing, who are educated enough to help children develop these skills, reading to them, talking to them. I think that's probably one of the best ways, is just to have equality, is to have the similar opportunities.
Yeah, I think quality comes from, it starts with the educators that are in the classroom, and training everybody the same and having the same education requirements for all teachers, regardless of age level, is a good start to that equality. Okay, I'll talk fast. I'm Karen, and the article I read is Baby Talk to Me. And in it, they did some research that really focused on the interactions between adults and babies, where the baby initiates the interaction. So it's not mom coming in and starting to talk to the baby, it's mom coming in and baby making eye contact, or baby pointing, or making some kind of vocalization, and then mom getting involved in the conversation that way. And basically, I mean, all the interactions that you have with your baby are important. When you're talking to your baby, you're helping them acquire language and develop those vocabulary skills and all of that. But they do tend to, retain is not quite the right word, but they noticed a bump that where children initiated those kinds of conversations, and parents and caretakers responded in kind. By age 3, those children had a higher vocabulary. So it is important to not only be the one to initiate the conversation, but to let them do it as well. So one of the quotes was, language learning is therefore powered by the shared social relationship between infants and caregivers, with infants' active participation in the conversation and maternal responsiveness to that participation being key elements in the acquisition process. And then just one other thing of note, they noticed in this study that mothers that were suffering from depression, that lessened the development of the infants. And so the conclusion is just that infants react better to positive emotions. But I think that's pretty important. The more we learn about postpartum depression and the effects that it can have on the mom, and we can see now that it also has an effect on the baby as well. So my questions were, how comfortable do you feel interacting with babies? And then, can you see a difference in children who may not have had enough quality adult interaction in their first years versus those who have? Like, you've got a first grader in your class. Can you look at them and know, hey, I bet people talk to you a lot more than maybe you were just told to be quiet and put in the corner?
Oh yeah, definitely. I can definitely tell. Last semester I was in an observation and field experience with first graders, actually, and you could tell which children had that a lot of interaction with their parents versus those who gave their kids a remote control to a video game and just said, here.
Yes, watch this Baby Einstein video. You'll learn so much.
Exactly.
And they don't learn.
And the kids would actually tell you, when you ask them, what do you do after school? Do you go home? Do you read? Do you read? Do your parents read to you? Because those are some of the questions I had to ask for some of my papers. And some of the kids were like, oh no, I go home and I play video games and I watch, TV and cartoons. And then mom comes home and she'll check my homework. And then I go back and watch TV again.
Yeah.
And then there are kids who say, oh, my parents make me read before I can watch TV. They make me explain to them what the book was about or what I read. We go over my homework. They'll ask me why I got questions wrong, on tests. I mean, you can definitely tell the difference.
I think you can also tell a lot by their personalities. Children who, in the early childhood setting, the ones that are more timid and less likely to come forward in the class or speak out are usually haven't had as much adult to child like interaction and conversations, or even like if a new teacher comes in the room or adult, they're not used to seeing. They may not be as vocal, or
Mhm.
just kind of tell they're not as comfortable in those scenarios. But I think you can definitely see the difference.
Yeah.
All right, ladies, I'm going to try to get this here. And I'm going to stop the video. Thank y'all so much for joining here. And I'm going to send a copy of the video link that I post. I'm going to post it on YouTube, so that way y'all have it too. And I'll submit it to Dr. Brown.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.